Hi there. So welcome to this YouTube channel. So in today's video we are going to know, or we are going to understand how the basics of t-test, what is t-test, the type of t-test, when to use t-test, and everything. So welcome. Kindly subscribe to this YouTube channel for more content like this. Let's begin. So what is t-test? One thing that you should know is a t-test is a statistical test that is used to compare the mean of two groups. If you have two groups that you want to compare if their mean is the same, you use t-test. For example, you enter in a classroom and you find a class with a population of, let's say, 60 people, 30 boys and 30 girls, and you want to compare the mean age of those two groups. We normally use t-test to compare the mean of two groups. In our case, we have boys and girls in a classroom, so we want to compare, is the mean the same? Is the mean of one A group bigger than the other? So we normally use t-test if we have two groups. Also, t-test is used to determine whether treatment or a process has an effect on the population we are interested in. Let's say you are in an hospital and you want to measure the effect of a certain drug on the weight of your patients. So you measure the weight of your patients before subjecting them to a certain treatment or drug, and measuring the weight after that treatment or drug. So if you want to compare the means of a weight before and after the treatment, you are going to use a t-test. So once again, t-test is used to determine whether a treatment or a process has an effect on the population we are interested in. Another thing to note is that t-test is useful to determine if the two groups are different from one another. So that is it from t-test, basics of t-test. And the next thing, the hypothesis. So the null hypothesis in a t-test is that the difference between two groups is zero, or the means are the same. So that is the null hypothesis. And the alternative hypothesis is the difference between the means is not equal to zero, meaning that the means are, one of the means is not the same. Okay? So we normally fail to reject the null hypothesis. Never in your life say that you have accepted the null hypothesis. So we normally use t-test to confirm either the statements. So when to use t-test? T-test is only used when comparing the mean of two groups. This is also known as pairwise comparison. It is more important to know if you are comparing more than two groups. If you want to compare the mean of more than two groups, you normally use ANOVA test. Okay? So note that t-test only two groups. ANOVA you can compare more than two groups. So that is when we use t-test if you want to compare the mean of two groups only. More than two, we use ANOVA. So the assumptions under t-test is that your data are independent. The data is normally distributed. What do we mean that your data is normally distributed? They are equally distributed in either sides of the central value. And homogeneity of variance. What does that mean? That your variance across your group or across the data is the same. Similar variance. That is what we mean by homogeneity of variance. And under t-test, we have one sample t-test, we have two sample t-test, and paired t-test. So what does this mean? And a two sample t-test is done when the group is being tested come from two different populations. For example, you have you want to compare the mean daily temperature between two towns. We have town A and town B. So as you can see, these are two different populations. And also another one, we have one sample t-test. So if the mean of a group is being compared to a given standard value, so you enter in a classroom, you find a classroom with 30 people, and you say, you put an assumption that the mean age of people in this classroom is 35. So that 35 is an assumption, and it is your standard value. So you want to prove that the mean age is 35. So under that case, you have set a standard value as 35, and we are going to use one sample t-test. Okay? So under paired t-test is used when groups being tested come from a single population. So like the first example I gave in this presentation is that you enter into a classroom, you find boys and girls, or let me not use that example. You're a doctor, you're trying certain medicine, you want to know the effect before and after that medicine has been administered. So we use paired t-test. The single population, that population is your patients. They're in okay. Let me not explain too much. Finally, we have one-tailed t-test and two-tailed t-test. So what is one-tailed t-test? One-tailed t-test is used when comparing if two populations are different from one another. So you have two populations, you want to compare if the means are the same. Okay? So under two sample t-test, it is used when we want to know if the mean of one population is greater than the mean of the other, or even if it is less than mean or the other. So it is important to note here these signs. Under one-tailed t-test, you'll have your hypothesis having the equal sign. Okay? So anytime you see your hypothesis, your null hypothesis or the alternative hypothesis having an equal sign and not equal to, just automatically that one is a one-tailed t-test. But when your hypothesis have these signs, that you are going to use a two-tailed t-test. Okay, thank you for being with me in this video. Kindly like this video if you found this video useful and subscribe for more content. Thank you. Goodbye.